Beyond the veil, your new normal after spiritual awakening. When the veil lifts, it doesn't feel like fireworks. Feels like silence so loud it startles you. One moment, you're living inside the rhythm everyone else seems to accept as normal. Waking up, scrolling, working, surviving, repeating, and the next moment, something inside you quietly refuses to go back. You can't explain it. You don't even want to talk about it yet. But the world you once moved through so effortlessly suddenly feels thin, like a stage set you can see behind. This is where the new normal begins, not with angels singing, but with the unsettling awareness that you are no longer who you were, and you will never fully fit back into that version again. At first, you think something is wrong with you. Why do conversations feel shallow now? Why do the things that used to excite you feel strangely hollow? Why does your spirit feel alert at night, as if it's listening for something you can't name? This is the moment many people try to undo their awakening. They numb it with noise, drown it with busyness, or pray for things to go back to normal. But the truth most people don't realize is that spiritually, there is no rewind button. Once your eyes open, they don't close the same way again. The Bible never describes awakening as comfortable. It describes it as light entering darkness, and light, by its very nature, exposes everything it touches. Suddenly, patterns you tolerated begin to bother you. Compromises you justified feel heavy. Entertainment you once consumed without thought now leaves an aftertaste of emptiness. This isn't because you're becoming judgmental. It's because your inner compass has been recalibrated. You're no longer navigating by cultural norms. You're responding to conviction. And conviction doesn't shout, presses. Your new normal includes an unfamiliar tension. Gratitude for clarity mixed with grief for who you used to be. You may mourn old friendships, not because anyone did anything wrong, but because the alignment is gone. It's one of the most misunderstood parts of spiritual awakening. Outgrowing people without hating them, loving them without being able to walk beside them anymore. Even Jesus experienced this moment when those closest to him struggled to understand the depth of what he carried. Awakening doesn't isolate you because you're better. It separates you because you're different. One of the most surprising shifts after awakening is how success begins to lose its shine. Not ambition, not excellence, but the obsessive hunger for validation. Applause feels brief. Titles feel temporary. Achievements feel like shadows compared to the weight of purpose pressing on your soul. You start asking questions that don't have easy answers. Why am I here? What is God actually asking of me? What if my calling doesn't look impressive but changes lives quietly? These questions don't make you weak. They mark you as awake. Prayer changes too. It becomes less about asking and more about listening. Less about performance and more about presence. You realize God was never impressed by polished words. He responds to surrendered hearts. Sometimes prayer becomes wordless. Sometimes it becomes tears. Sometimes it becomes silence where you sense more than you hear. This is when faith moves from concept to connection. You stop believing in God as an idea and begin relating to Him as a living presence shaping your decisions, interrupting your plans, and challenging your comfort. Your perception of time shifts. You feel an urgency you didn't have before, not panic, but purpose. Wasted days begin to bother you. Meaningless distractions lose their grip. You become more intentional about what you allow into your mind, your spirit, your home. This is why awakening often looks like withdrawal from certain spaces, not because you're afraid of the world, but because you're learning how influential it really is. Scripture warns that transformation happens through renewal of the mind, and renewal requires boundaries. Then comes the warfare, quiet, psychological, internal. Doubt whispers that you're imagining things. Fear suggests you're losing people, opportunities, or stability. Temptation resurfaces, not stronger, but more strategic. This is the part no one posts about. Awakening attracts resistance because clarity threatens darkness. The enemy doesn't need to destroy you. Distraction will do. And so your new normal includes discernment, recognizing which battles deserve your energy and which are designed to drain you. What shocks many people is how suffering begins to make sense. Not because pain feels good, but because it feels purposeful. You start seeing trials as refining fires instead of punishments. Biblical figures weren't awakened in comfort. They were shaped in wilderness seasons where reliance replaced self-confidence. In those moments, you realize strength doesn't come from control but from trust. And trust grows fastest when outcomes are uncertain. You also notice a strange compassion developing. Things that once annoyed you now soften you. You see people's wounds beneath their behavior. You recognize fear beneath anger, insecurity beneath pride, loneliness beneath noise. Awakening doesn't make you superior. It makes you sensitive. It doesn't harden you. It humbles you. You stop trying to win arguments and start trying to understand hearts. Your relationship with truth becomes sharper. You're no longer satisfied with borrowed beliefs. You search Scripture not to confirm opinions but to be transformed. You begin to notice how often biblical truth contradicts cultural logic. The world celebrates self-exaltation. The kingdom honors humility. The world promotes self-preservation. The gospel invites self-surrender. This tension is uncomfortable, but it's where authenticity is forged. Another unexpected shift is how joy changes form. It becomes quieter but deeper, less dependent on circumstances, more rooted in identity. Happiness reacts to events. Joy anchors to meaning. Even in moments of uncertainty, you feel held. Not because life is easy, but because you're no longer facing it alone. You realize God's presence doesn't remove storms. It stabilizes you within them. Your new normal also includes waiting. Waiting for clarity. Waiting for alignment. Waiting for doors to open or close. Waiting is not punishment. It's preparation. Scripture consistently shows that God does more in the waiting room than in the spotlight. In stillness, motives are purified. In delay, dependence is deepened. In silence, character is built. You begin to understand why awakening can feel lonely. Few people talk about it because it's deeply personal and often misunderstood. But you are not alone. You are part of a lineage of awakened souls who chose obedience over comfort, truth over popularity, and purpose over ease. The Bible calls this walking by faith, not by sight, and faith, by definition, often looks irrational to those who haven't felt the pull of eternity. Eventually, the fear fades, not all at once, but gradually. You stop trying to explain yourself to everyone. You stop shrinking to fit spaces you've outgrown. You learn that obedience is more important than approval. And somewhere along the way, you realize the new normal isn't something you lost. It's something you gained. Depth, clarity, direction, intimacy with God that feels real, not rehearsed. You don't need to have all the answers. Awakening isn't about knowing everything. It's about trusting the one who does. It's about waking up each day willing to be led instead of driven, shaped instead of praised, refined instead of rushed. The veil didn't lift to confuse you, it lifted to free you. And maybe that's the real surprise. Spiritual awakening doesn't remove you from the world. It teaches you how to live in it without being owned by it. It gives you eyes to see beyond appearances, ears to hear beyond noise, and a heart tuned to eternity. This is your new normal, not louder, not flashier, but truer than anything you've known before. And once you've seen beyond the veil, going back was never an option. And even when you try to pretend it didn't happen, even when you attempt to live like you used to, something inside you resists. You can sit in the same rooms, talk to the same people, scroll the same feeds, but you are no longer processing reality from the same place. It's like learning a language you can't unlearn. You hear undertones now. You sense intentions. You notice patterns. And this awareness doesn't switch off just because you're tired. In fact, it often becomes louder in moments of exhaustion, when your defenses are down and truth slips in unannounced. There are days when this new awareness feels like a burden. You wish you could just enjoy things without overthinking, without feeling the weight behind every choice. You realize that awakening comes with responsibility. Once you see clearly, you are accountable for what you do with that vision. Ignorance was comfortable. Awareness demands integrity. This is why many awakened people go through seasons of inner conflict, wrestling with old habits that no longer fit and new callings that feel intimidating. Growth rarely feels graceful while it's happening. Your emotional world changes too. You feel things more deeply, both joy and sorrow. You may cry at moments that seem insignificant to others. A song, a scripture, a stranger's pain can suddenly move you in ways you can't explain. This sensitivity isn't weakness, it's alignment. A hardened heart can survive, but a softened heart can transform. And transformation is what awakening was always about. You also begin to notice how often God speaks through interruption. Plans fall apart, detours appear, doors close without explanation. At first, this feels frustrating, even unfair. But slowly, you begin to see the pattern. Redirection was protection. Delay was alignment. Loss was pruning. What felt like setbacks were actually recalibrations steering you toward something more honest than what you had settled for. Awakening teaches you that God's silence is not absence, and His timing is rarely accidental. Your definition of strength evolves. You stop equating it with control and start associating it with surrender. You realize that the strongest people aren't the loudest or the most aggressive, but the ones who can remain faithful without immediate results, peaceful without external validation, and obedient without applause. The Bible calls this endurance, and endurance is forged in places no one applauds. Private battles, quiet choices, unseen sacrifices. There will be moments when you question whether this path is worth it, when obedience costs you comfort, when truth costs you relationships, when integrity costs you opportunities. These moments test whether awakening was a feeling or a commitment. And each time you choose alignment over ease, something solidifies inside you. Your faith becomes less emotional and more rooted, less reactive and more resilient. Another subtle change happens in how you view yourself. You stop defining your identity by roles, mistakes, or achievements. You begin to see yourself as someone in process, shaped by grace rather than trapped by history. Shame loses its grip. Condemnation loses its voice. You understand that conviction is meant to guide, not crush. This is one of the most freeing realizations of awakening, that God corrects because He cares, not because He rejects. Your conversations with God become more honest. You stop pretending to be strong when you're not. You stop hiding your doubts. You stop filtering your emotions. And instead of pulling away, you find that honesty deepens intimacy. Awakening strips away performance-based faith and replaces it with relationship-based trust. You no longer seek God only for answers. You seek Him for alignment. You also become more patient with others who aren't where you are. You remember how long it took you to see what you see now. You understand that awakening can't be forced, it's revealed. This humility protects you from spiritual pride, one of the most dangerous traps after awakening. True maturity isn't proven by how much you know, but by how gently you carry it. Eventually, the new normal stops feeling new. It becomes home. Discernment becomes instinct. Prayer becomes breath. Faith becomes framework. You still face challenges, but you face them differently. You don't panic as quickly. You don't crumble as easily. You don't chase answers as desperately. You trust the process because you trust the author. And one day you'll look back and realize the veil didn't just lift so you could see more. It lifted so you could become more. More anchored, more authentic, more aligned, more alive. This is what lies beyond the veil. Not perfection, not ease, but truth that grounds you, purpose that steadies you, and a faith that doesn't disappear when circumstances change. This is your new normal, and it didn't come to ruin your life, came to reveal it. And as you live in this revealed life, you begin to notice something subtle but profound. Fear no longer controls your decisions the way it used to. It still shows up, but it no longer sits on the throne. You feel it, acknowledge it, and move forward anyway. Awakening doesn't eliminate fear, it reorders authority. You no longer ask, "What if this fails?" as often as you ask, "What if this is what obedience looks like?" That shift alone changes everything. You start trusting the unseen work happening beneath the surface. You understand that roots grow in darkness long before fruit appears in daylight. When nothing seems to be changing outwardly, you sense that something is strengthening inwardly. The Bible often speaks of seasons, and now those metaphors feel real. There are winters where nothing blooms, yet life is quietly being preserved. Awakening teaches you not to rush seasons you were meant to survive. Your relationship with uncertainty matures. You stop demanding clarity for every step and learn to walk with just enough light for the next one. This kind of faith doesn't feel dramatic. It feels steady. It's the kind that shows up consistently, prays even when emotions are flat, and keeps choosing integrity when shortcuts would be easier. You realize that faithfulness, not intensity, is what sustains transformation over time. There's also a growing awareness that your life is no longer just about you. Your choices ripple outward more than you realized before. The way you speak, forgive, endure, and love becomes a testimony even when you're not trying to inspire anyone. Awakening quietly turns your life into a message. People may not ask about your beliefs, but they notice your peace. They notice your restraint. They notice your resilience. And sometimes, without you saying a word, they begin to question what anchors you. You also come to terms with the fact that awakening doesn't guarantee comfort or constant clarity. Some days still feel confusing. Some prayers still feel unanswered. Some paths still feel lonely. But the difference now is that confusion doesn't shake your foundation. You've learned that God is present even when explanations are absent. And that presence becomes enough. There's a deepening reverence for obedience in small things. You realize that transformation is rarely about dramatic moments and more about daily alignment. The quiet decision to forgive, the unseen choice to tell the truth, the discipline to guard your thoughts. These are the places where awakening becomes real, not in what you proclaim publicly, but in what you practice privately. Over time, you stop chasing spiritual experiences and start cultivating spiritual consistency. You understand that maturity isn't measured by how often you feel inspired, but by how faithfully you live aligned when inspiration fades. This steadiness gives you a kind of peace that isn't dependent on outcomes. You trust that even when you don't understand the chapter you're in, the story is still being written with intention. And perhaps the most unexpected realization of all begins to settle in. You are not behind. You were never late. You weren't overlooked or forgotten. Every delay, every detour, every closed door played a role in preparing you for the awareness you now carry. Awakening reveals that timing is not about speed, it's about readiness. Eventually, gratitude replaces regret. You stop wishing you had awakened sooner and start appreciating the process that brought you here. You understand that you couldn't have carried this awareness in earlier seasons. You were becoming someone capable of holding it. And now that you do, you handle life differently, more gently, more wisely, more intentionally. This is when awakening stops feeling like disruption and starts feeling like alignment. Life doesn't become simpler, but it becomes clearer. Pain doesn't disappear, but it becomes meaningful. And faith stops being something you turn to in emergencies and becomes the lens through which you interpret everything. Beyond the veil, you don't escape reality, you finally see it. You don't lose yourself, you uncover who you were always becoming. And you don't walk alone, you walk aware, anchored, and awake. This is not the end of the journey. It's the beginning of living it on purpose. And living on purpose begins to feel different than you imagined. It's quieter, less dramatic, more intentional. You stop waiting for constant confirmation and start moving with inner assurance. You don't need signs for every step anymore because discernment has been sharpened through experience. You've learned to recognize peace, not as excitement, but as alignment. The kind that doesn't rush you but steadies you. You also realize that awakening doesn't remove human struggle. You still feel tired. You still have moments of doubt. You still wrestle with patience, timing, and unanswered questions. But now, struggle doesn't mean failure. It means formation. You no longer interpret hardship as abandonment. Instead, you ask what is being shaped in you through it. That shift alone keeps you grounded when others collapse under pressure. Your perspective on loss transforms. What once felt like something being taken now feels like something being released. You understand that not everything you lose was meant to go with you. Some things were assigned to earlier versions of you. Awakening gives you the courage to let go without resentment, to bless what's leaving instead of clinging to it out of fear. There's a growing confidence that doesn't need to announce itself. You stop proving, defending, and explaining. You let your life speak. You trust that what's meant for you won't require manipulation, and what isn't meant for you won't be secured through force. This confidence isn't arrogance. It's surrender practiced over time. Moments of doubt still arise, but they no longer define you. You don't spiral the way you used to. You've learned how to anchor yourself when emotions fluctuate. You've learned how to sit with questions without letting them dismantle your faith. Doubt becomes a doorway to deeper understanding rather than a threat to belief. You start seeing people differently too, less as roles, more as stories, less as obstacles, more as souls navigating their own awakenings and resistances. This perspective softens your judgments. You become slower to label, quicker to empathize. Awakening doesn't make you naive, it makes you compassionate without being gullible. Your relationship with hope matures. It's no longer fragile or dependent on outcomes. It becomes resilient, rooted in trust rather than circumstance. You hope even when evidence is thin. You believe even when answers are delayed. Not because you're in denial, but because you've seen how things unfold in ways you couldn't predict. Experience has taught you that despair is rarely prophetic. You also recognize that rest is not laziness, it's obedience. You stop glorifying exhaustion. You listen to your limits. You understand that sustainability matters more than speed. Awakening teaches you that you don't have to burn yourself out to prove your devotion. Even creation rests, and you are part of that design. There's a quiet confidence that settles in, not because you have control, but because you've released the need for it. You trust guidance more than guarantees. You follow peace more than pressure. You understand that forcing outcomes often delays them, while alignment accelerates what's meant to arrive. And then there are moments, small, unexpected moments, where gratitude catches you off guard. You realize you're thankful for who you didn't become, for paths you didn't take, for versions of yourself you outgrew. Awakening gives you perspective not just on where you're going, but on how far you've come. You no longer crave constant reassurance. You've learned to recognize confirmation through consistency rather than signs. You don't need everything to make sense immediately. You're comfortable walking forward with partial understanding, trusting that clarity will meet you when timing aligns with readiness. Living awake doesn't make life predictable, but it makes it meaningful. It doesn't shield you from pain, but it prevents pain from being pointless. You carry hope without naivety, faith without illusion, and strength without hardness. And perhaps the most beautiful realization of all is this: you are no longer waiting for life to begin. You are participating in it fully present, aware, grounded. You are no longer chasing some distant version of fulfillment. You are building it daily through choices rooted in truth. Beyond the veil, you don't search for yourself anymore. You live as yourself, awake, aligned, and finally at peace with the journey unfolding one faithful step at a time. And if you've stayed with this journey all the way to this moment, that itself says something about you. It says your spirit recognizes truth when it hears it. It says something in you is listening beyond entertainment, beyond noise, beyond habit. Not everyone makes it to the end of conversations like this, because not everyone is ready to look inward without distraction. But you did, and that matters. What you've heard here isn't meant to rush you, pressure you, or make you feel like you need to be more spiritual overnight. It's meant to reassure you that what you're experiencing has meaning, that the changes inside you aren't random, that the discomfort, the clarity, the quiet shifts in your priorities, they're not signs that something is wrong with you. They're signs that something is being formed within you. If this message gave words to something you felt but couldn't explain, let that be your confirmation. You're not alone in this. There are others walking this same quiet path, learning how to live awake in a world that often rewards sleep. And this channel exists for that reason, to give language to the unseen, strength to the weary, and clarity to those navigating growth that doesn't always come with applause. So if this spoke to you even a little, take a moment and show it. Tap the like button not just for the algorithm, but as a small acknowledgement that this message reached you. Share it with someone who's been feeling different lately and doesn't know why. Someone who might need to hear that their journey makes sense. And subscribe so you don't have to walk this process alone. Every video here is created for people who are thinking deeper, feeling more, and searching honestly. And as you go back into your day, carry this with you gently. You don't have to have everything figured out to be exactly where you're meant to be. Growth doesn't demand perfection. It asks for willingness. Awareness doesn't require certainty. It grows through trust. And awakening isn't about becoming someone else. It's about returning to who you were always meant to be. Move forward with patience. Speak to yourself with kindness. Honor the season you're in. And remember, every step you take in alignment, no matter how small, is shaping a life that is real, grounded, and meaningful. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening deeply. And thank you for choosing growth over comfort. Until the next moment of clarity, stay awake, stay aligned, and keep walking forward.